Have you ever stopped to think about how some things in GTA 5 just don't make any sense? Sure, it's a video game, but since 2010 or even 2013, the goal of video games has been to make them as realistic as possible. Even though GTA 5 is an amazing game, it definitely has some bizarre stuff that will leave you scratching your head. So, in today's video, I'm going to show you 5 things you've probably misunderstood in GTA 5, played the wrong way, or completely overlooked and likely never even noticed. With that in mind, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to show some support. Let's get started. The first point we're diving into is about the mission Friend Request. For those who don't remember, this is the mission where Michael reconnects with Lester after years of not seeing him. At this point, Michael needs money to pay off Martin Madrazo after the chaos of tearing down the house and getting beaten up in front of his own home. In this mission, before Lester introduces the main heist, the jewelry store job to get the cash, he asks Michael for a favor. Sabotage the prototype smartphone of Jay Norris, the CEO of Life Invader. And here's where one of the biggest plot holes in the game comes into play. Michael manages to infiltrate Life Invader without a mask or any meaningful disguise. Sure, he passes himself off as a programmer or IT tech, helped by Ricky Lukens, who vouches for him at the entrance. Michael plants the bomb in Jay Norris's phone and leaves the office without raising suspicion. Shortly after, he watches the live broadcast and detonates the bomb by calling the sabotaged phone, killing Jay Norris on national television. But here's the craziest part of this mission. Nobody goes after Michael. It's clear that some people, like Ricky Lukens, know Michael was involved. Ricky even calls Michael afterward to offer his services for future heists. But beyond that, there's no fallout. No FIB, no police, no investigation, nothing. This creates a massive plot hole in the game. Now let's think about it. Jay Norris is clearly a parody of Mark Zuckerberg, a billionaire social media. His death live on air should have triggered a massive investigation. Security cameras, employee testimonies, a full-scale corporate sweep. It wouldn't have been hard to connect the dots and identify Michael as the perpetrator. Yet, the game completely brushes this off, making it one of the most glaring inconsistencies in GTA 4's storyline. A plausible explanation could be that Lester hacked into Life Invader's system remotely and erased the security camera footage. However, this is never mentioned in the game. So to me, it just feels like a plot hole or something that wasn't fully developed or explained. That being said, it's important to remember that none of this diminishes the game's quality. Everything I'm pointing out here is just about plot holes or details that might not have made sense. This isn't a critique of the game, but an analysis of some things that seem a little off. Of course, if anyone knows what actually happened or if other missions provide more context, that would be awesome to hear. Leave your thoughts in the comments and let me know what you think. Alright, let's move on to the second point, and honestly, this one doesn't make much sense to me. If anyone has an explanation for it, feel free to share in the comments. I'd love to understand what the heck is going on here. So here's the deal. During the game, we have the Paleto Bay heist, which is done to raise funds for the Humane Labs raid. Up to this point, everything makes sense. The crew storms in, heavily armed, shoots everything up, causes chaos in Paleto Bay, and manages to steal $8 million from this small-town bank, which was tied up in some extortion schemes. All good so far. The part that gets really weird for me is when, after a while, the SWAT shows up. I can understand the SWAT getting involved. It's a massive shootout, lots of destruction in the town, people dying left and right. But when the military shows up, that's where the logic goes completely out the window. Think about it. We rob $8 million from a small-town bank in Paleto Bay, and the military gets deployed. Yes, the actual military shows up, with tanks, troops, and even a cargo bob. These are the same guys who should only be mobilized for terrorist threats or war scenarios. Now compare that to the Union Depository heist where we robbed $200 million. There we only face the Merryweather security and the police. Like, how does that make any sense? If I remember correctly, when you do the Union Depository job using the option B approach, the SWAT might show up as well. But even then, no military, no tanks, nothing like what happens in Paleto Bay. Meanwhile, during the Paleto Bay heist, they send in the army complete with tanks and military helicopters. One possible explanation could be that Paleto Bay is closer to Fort Zancudo, which allowed for a quicker military response. But if you look at the map, Paleto Bay isn't that close to Fort Zancudo, and the Union Depository isn't that far away. Logically, the Union Depository should have been a far bigger priority for the authorities. After all, you're dealing with national reserves, a much bigger deal than some small-town bank tied to corruption. So yeah, this one feels off to me. It's like the game tried to ramp up the stakes for Paleto Bay by throwing in the military, but they didn't follow through with the same logic for the Union Depository, where it arguably made more sense. The third thing is very similar to what happened in the first point I mentioned about Jay Norris. I'm talking about the mission Legal Trouble. For those who don't remember, this is the mission where you chase Molly because she's carrying a copy of the film Meltdown. During her escape, she eventually gets shredded in a hangar. That part's fine, there's nothing you can really do to stop it. The big issue here, though, is the same as in Jay Norris's case. If there were police escorting Molly, how did nobody investigate who was chasing her, aka Michael? Let's assume Michael pursued Molly through the entire route. She died in a brutal way, and then he leaves the hangar, killing or not killing the guards depending on how you play. He still ends up wanted by the police, but there doesn't seem to be any deeper consequences for his actions. And that's it. There's no investigation tying this back to Michael, no significant police follow-up, and no repercussions from the authorities. The only thing that comes from this event is Devin Weston's personal vendetta during the mission Meltdown, where he sends Merryweather agents to Michael's house to kill his family. But that's a personal revenge act by Devin Weston, not an official action by the police, FIB, IAA, or any other agency. A possible explanation, though never confirmed in the game, is that Dave Norton might be covering for Michael. After all, he's using Michael for his own agenda, so he wouldn't want Michael getting incriminated at this stage. That could be it. Maybe, but there's no concrete evidence in the game to back up this theory. I don't know. It feels like a loose end without much explanation, and it starts to sound strange the more you think about it. The fourth point worth observing is something that might make sense in theory, but feels a bit odd in the game's context. Here's the question. How did Trevor, after all the chaos in Ludendorff, North Yankton, and everything else, never get pursued by the police, or even face an attempt to arrest him all these years? Think about it. In the prologue, Dave Norton made a deal with Michael, part of which was to take care of Trevor so Michael could live a quiet life, but Trevor managed to escape. Tracking him down wouldn't have been that hard, especially since Lester mentions that he monitored Trevor for a while. And when Lester realized Trevor wasn't a threat, he simply stopped keeping tabs on him. When we pick up the story in 2013 with Trevor, we see that he's involved in all kinds of illegal activities, drug trafficking, arms dealing, and just being a generally unstable force of chaos. That's Trevor's personality, and the game makes that very clear. But what's strange is that the police never really went after Trevor. Let's not forget that Dave Norton maintained contact with him by pretending to be Brad. Dave communicated with Trevor as if he were Brad, meaning he likely had some information about Trevor's whereabouts. Maybe he didn't know exactly where Trevor was at all times, but he knew Trevor was alive and still posed a risk. Yet Dave Norton chose not to pursue Trevor. For me, this doesn't make much sense. Keeping Trevor alive was a huge liability, especially for the guy who was paying Dave Norton over 5 figures every month, Michael DeSanta. You'd think Dave would have a strong incentive to eliminate Trevor, or at least keep him locked up to protect the deal he had with Michael. But instead, Trevor is left alone for years, causing mayhem without any significant consequences. It feels like a loose thread in the story. In fifth place, we've got something that might blow your mind. It'll really make you think and even feel sorry for Mr. K. For those who don't remember, Mr. K is the guy we rescue from the IAA building while pretending to be an FIB extraction team. Afterward, he's tortured by Trevor and the FIB team during one of the most brutal missions in the game. Honestly, I don't even enjoy playing that mission, but that's not the point here. The real issue is what happens after the torture. Steve Haynes, after putting Mr. K through hell, orders Trevor to get rid of him. Steve's reasoning is that Mr. K is no longer useful and could serve as evidence of the FIB's abuses, including the torture, their illegal schemes to secure funding, and the rivalry with the IAA. Trevor, however, decides not to follow Steve's orders. Instead, he takes Mr. K to the airport and tells him to disappear, leave the system, abandon his family, and return to his home country. In theory, Mr. K takes Trevor's advice and vanishes. But here's where the problem lies. If you stop to think about it, the state of Mr. K when he gets out of the car is absolutely pitiful. He's beaten up, shirtless, injured, and likely has no ID or money. How could someone in that condition possibly board an international flight? First, he'd have to go through airport security. But looking the way he does, there's no way he wouldn't attract attention. A guard or officer would almost certainly intercept him. It just doesn't make sense that he could board a flight without documents, money, or looking the way he does. Second, even if he somehow managed to get through, it's highly likely that the FIB was still keeping tabs on him. If Mr. K got caught at the airport or tried to flee in some other way, the FIB probably stepped in and handled the problem quietly, eliminating him without leaving any trace. This could also explain why, later in the game, Steve Haynes and Dave Norton are so insistent on wanting Trevor dead. They claim it's because Trevor is unstable, but they never fully explain why. It's possible that Trevor's decision to let Mr. K live put the entire FIB operation at risk, turning him into an even bigger liability. So if you really think about it, it doesn't make much sense for Mr. K to have successfully escaped and returned home. It's far more likely that he was intercepted and quietly eliminated, which fits much better with the overall story. What do you guys think? And guys, GTA 5 has been out for over 10 years, and we're still discovering new stuff about it every day. Have you ever noticed those crazy differences between the very first version? Yes, the very first version on PS3 and Xbox 360 to the current one? click on the video indicated by the arrow to check it out. And that's it, guys. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care and bye.